Science visualization, we're going to talk today about web design. My name is Guy Stevens. I know I had an opportunity to speak to a number of you already as part of the photography segment, and today I'm going to be talking to you about web. Of course, I'm with the University of Maryland Center for Environmental Science, where I work as the Director of Web Development. I work out of the Chesapeake Bay Program Office in Annapolis, and I lead the development of web products for the web team there at the Bay Program. I've been doing web products for nearly 20 years, and a lot has changed over that time, but there are a lot of things that have remained the same. So our agenda today, I want to talk about a few things. First, I want to talk about using websites to communicate science. Why do you want to use a website? Why might you consider a web product to communicate your science visualization? Next, I want to talk about considerations before you build a website. So before you actually begin to construct, what do you need to begin to think about? Next, I'll talk about what makes a great website. There's a lot of websites out on the web. Some of them are very good. Some of them are not. What's the difference? What makes a great site? And then I'll talk a bit about data visualization tools. There's a whole wide array of tools out there on the web that you can use to create visualization products and even web products and websites. So I'll talk about a few of those and give you some ideas. And finally, I'll talk about creating your own website. So if you want to make your own website to house your data visualizations, what are things you might want to consider? So let's begin by talking about using websites to communicate science. Why use the web? So why do we want to use the web to share our data or to share our data visualization? There's a number of reasons. One, of course, is that there are a lot of people using the web. Over 3 billion users today are using the internet for various things. And that's a growth that we've seen over a number of years. You know, we go back to 1996, and today the numbers have almost reversed. Where in 96, about 85% weren't using the internet and 15% were. Today it's really the opposite. About 85% are and about 15% aren't. So, certainly a lot of people are using the web. And the key here is that more people are using the web in more places to do more things. So they're using the web on their mobile devices. They're using the web on their tablets. They're using the web, at a desktop computer or on a laptop. But they're doing more and more things on the internet today than ever before. And they expect to get that information in more places than ever before. And at the end of the day, it's really about communication. So a science visualization product really aims at communicating science, taking something complex and communicating it. You may be communicating it for a number of different reasons, but really at the end of the day, the goal is to communicate the science, to allow people to share it, allow people to see it and to draw their own conclusions from it as well. And when it comes to communicating, the web is a great platform for that. So let's rewind for a second and just talk a bit about data visualization. As much of this course is focused on data visualization, I just want to return to some very simple definitions of data visualization. So when we think about what is data visualization, well, very simply, it's a way to give your data a voice. Data in a spreadsheet or data in a database don't communicate. It's not until you find a way to take that complex data and communicate it, often through a visualization, that really gives your data the ability to speak and to highlight patterns, trends, correlations. So, data visualization is a way to give data a voice. And what we look for is we look to try to get it into an easy-to-digest visual format, because simply giving your data a voice is not going to help you if it's not easy for people to understand and digest. And that's the whole point behind, kind of visualizations is let's take these complex ideas and try to simplify them for different reasons. Sometimes it's to communicate them outwardly. Sometimes it's to help a scientist understand the trends that they're seeing. So again, an easy-to-digest visual format. And when it comes to easy-to-digest visual formats, it's really tough to beat the web. Because a website can do a lot of things. One, it gives you a publishing platform for which you can share your information, which you can share your data visualization. But not only do you get a platform, you get a platform that can be updated at any moment. So at some point you get new data and you want to update the message, you can go into your website and make that update immediately. And a website, more and more today than ever, is available to a lot of people in a lot of situations, whether they're out on the road and only have their phone, or maybe they're on travels and they're looking at it on their tablet or their laptop or desktop. Again, you can get a website that can work well across a number of different platforms and help you communicate your messages. So at the end of the day, the web is really a great platform for telling stories. And isn't that really what data visualization is all about? Is telling stories with your data, showing trends, making things simple. And the web is a really great platform for doing that. I often call the web the great equalizer. And the reason being is that, whether you're a single individual in a graduate course that wants to put up a website, or you're a large organization or corporation, your website lives on the same internet. It lives on the same internet next to websites from much larger voices and organizations. So you have the ability on the web, whether you're kind of a small dog or a big dog, to tell the same story and reach a lot of the same audience. It doesn't mean that you'll instantly reach the same audience, but you have that capability through a website. So at the end of the day, the web is really just a great way to get your message out. To share your data, to make your stories available. So let's talk about considerations before you build a website. And this is really important because sometimes people are in such a rush to accomplish something, they forget to do the planning. And planning is essential to be successful in any endeavor. But in a website, it is very critical that you plan appropriately so that your web product is successful. So one of the first things that we typically do when we're building a website, let's say that I'm at the BAE program working on building a website. One of the first things that I typically would do is we would work to define the business case. So what are we hoping to accomplish with the web product that we're going to build? So if we have an idea, we want to build a web product, what do we want to get out of it as an organization? Why do we want to build this web product? It's really important to define your business case. And your business case, at the end of the day, really should be a way to measure what you include or don't include on your website. So, as an example, one of the recent products that we launched was Chesapeake Progress. Chesapeake Progress is designed to track the progress towards the new Bay Watershed Agreement. That's the business case. Track the progress towards the new Bay Watershed Agreement. So, when deciding what to include on that website, that has to answer the question, does it track the progress, help track the progress towards the Bay Watershed Agreement? If it doesn't, then it might not be a good fit for that particular web product. It doesn't mean that it wouldn't belong on the web, but it might not be a good product to include within a given web product that does this certain thing. And having a business case is good because it helps you to keep the focus and the scope of your site as narrow as possible and as focused as possible so that you can be successful. One of the next things you need to consider is your audience. Who is your audience for your web product? If you want to create something, why do you want to create it and who do you want to create it for? Who's going to use it? Really important questions to ask. It's very easy to make assumptions like, everybody's going to use this. And oftentimes when I ask people questions like who's their audience, I get a very long answer that includes pretty much everyone and usually ends with, and the general public. And I can tell you that for many of the products that I see that are created out of kind of the BAE program and others, some of those audiences aren't, in fact, going to be actual audiences for those products. So it's really important that you think thoughtfully about who your audience is for a given product. A successful product really needs to understand who the audience is and what their needs are. And at the end of the day, again, if you try to serve everyone, you will often serve no one. So it's really important that you understand specifically who your audience is and ultimately what they're going to want to accomplish. And that gets us into thinking about user needs. It's important not just to be able to name your audience, but to understand what are the things that they're going to want to accomplish with your web product. This is critical to making something that's going to be useful and relevant to them. So one of the things that we try to do is understand what our users need, and we develop what are called user tasks. A user task is simply something that a user would do when they came to the website. So, as an example, if we think again about Chesapeake Progress, we track the progress towards the new Bay Watershed Agreement. There is an outcome related to blue crabs. So a user task might be, learn the current status of blue crabs as it relates to the watershed agreement. How is the bake program doing meeting that outcome? So a user might want to know, what's the status? What's the status of blue crabs? And they'd be able to come to the site and figure out that information. So again, tasks are an important way that we can understand what users might want to do. And in initial phases, we're trying to take our best guess at what we think users might want to do. Later in the process, though, we're going to want to validate that through some research of some kind. So a take-home here is that if a product doesn't meet user needs, it's not going to be used. So you can make a great product that meets your business case, but if it's not meeting user needs as well, it's not going to be useful and it's not going to be used. So it's important to make sure that you put some consideration into the things you're expecting people to be able to do on your web product. The next step in this process is to spend some time validating user needs. And we call that discovery research. Discovery research is where you go out and you've named your business case, you've kind of articulated what that is, you've come up with an audience, you've thought through some user tasks. So the next task is really to validate those user needs. We can do that through what we call discovery research. And discovery research is really just the way to begin to ground truth some of our initial assumptions. It may be going out and talking to users and figuring out, are these actual tasks that you would see yourself wanting to accomplish? We might do that through what's called a user workshop. A user workshop, we would meet actual end users for the product and determine what their needs were. What would they need to accomplish? Another thing we might do in discovery research are stakeholder interviews. So who are some of the key stakeholders that might be involved in a project? Is it the management at your organization? Is it scientists? Who is it that might be key stakeholders in the project? And with that, you're going to want to kind of understand what they would hope to see coming out of the project as well. Better to understand this early than late when you've already developed a product that doesn't meet or align with the expectations. Another technique that we sometimes use for research is something called comparative analysis. This is something that we'll do when we're first kind of getting started with a project. We'll go out and we'll look at other similar products and try to determine their strengths and weaknesses. So for example, if I wanted to build an online shoe store, I might go out and find 5 other websites that were online shoe stores. I'd want to determine what is it that they do well, what don't they do well, where is there room for improvement, and kind of understand how they work. This comparative analysis gives us the ability to kind of build on existing ideas that work. And while we don't want to reinvent the wheel each time, and we can be innovative, it's always good to learn from what's out there and what the landscape looks like now. So these are some of the types of discovery research that we might conduct. Minimally, though, what we really want to do is validate some of those user needs. So if we decided early on that we expected users to accomplish certain tasks, we want to make sure that those tasks are in fact typical of what those users might want to accomplish. The next step in planning for a great website is to think about content strategy. Define kind of what are the basic content needs to communicate what I'm trying to communicate. So content can come in many shapes and sizes. Content, of course, is written words. Content can be a video. Content can be photographs. It can be a chart. It can be a graph. There's lots of different kinds of content. What you want to do is start by kind of taking an inventory of what that content might be that you have. You might want to create new content. And ultimately, once you kind of develop your content and develop your website, you're going to want to think about how you can promote that content, how you might evaluate that content. So, for example, one of the important things that we need to do is we want to see if things are successful. So you can use free analytics like Google Analytics to see, are people looking at your content? How long are they looking at the content? So you can begin to understand what's successful and what's not. So evaluating your content is always important. And of course, part of the content strategy is that you have to figure out a way to maintain content. Some content is rather evergreen and doesn't need to be changed frequently, but other things will get dated. And dated information can really affect your credibility. If people come to your site and they expect to find something current and what they find is old and dated, it may affect their opinion of your web product. So content strategy is really, really important. One of the next things to think about before you actually build your site is you've thought about your audience, you've thought about your business case, you've thought about your content strategy, you've done some research to validate some of those user needs. One of the next things that you can do is you can begin to sketch out some of your ideas. Oftentimes people go straight to building a website rather than using some of the tools out there to think about ideas before you invest in actually building. And one of the very simple ways of kind of prototyping websites is with a Sharpie and some paper, drawing out different ideas. We go through an exercise often at the Bay program we call a design sprint, where what we'll actually do is we'll get a number of people involved. It may be stakeholders, they may be managers, they may be users, and we'll get them with Sharpies and with paper. Sometimes we use those giant kind of Post-its, and we'll have them sketch out their ideas. What do they think this website might look like? What kind of content would be included in the site? And we have a number of people that start out with their individual ideas, kind of a divergent exercise, and then they'll go through a process where they look at everyone else's prototypes, and they use voting stickers to kind of vote, what do you like? What do you think works? And at the end of that process, we start to see the good ideas coming to the top. And lots of good ideas coming from different people. So we start out kind of a divergent exercise and kind of begin to converge on some similar ideas. Those ideas then can be rolled into a slightly higher fidelity prototype, as an example, or just another sketch. So sketching is a really powerful tool to help you think through your ideas before you actually begin to put them into a web product. One of the other things that we can do in this process is we can actually do some very simple user testing. User testing is a process that I highly believe in many different ways, but user testing doesn't need to happen at the end of the development of a web product. It can also happen early in the development. So you can take some of those sketches that you've made and actually sit down potential users and have them try to accomplish tasks. So for example, you might have 5 diagrams representing 5 different pages of your potential website. You could actually have the user sit down and say, okay, well, show me how you would accomplish this task using the paper prototype versus a real digital website. The advantage here is that you can get input early in the process before you've actually put a lot of effort into kind of building a website. The more effort you put into building the site, the less likely you are to want to change it. Where when you're working with paper, people tend to be much more receptive to making changes because, hey, it's only paper. You can crumble it up and start over again. So again, that type of user testing where you sit people down, you have them use this kind of paper prototype can be very informative and can really help you ultimately build a better product. So let's move on and talk about what makes a great website. Again, that should be our goal. If we're going to build something, let's build something great. Whether it's a poster or brochure or website, we really want to try to build something that's going to be really top quality. So what does make a great website? Well, there's a lot of elements to making a great website. One of the first important elements is design. Having a site that's well designed, and when I talk about design is beyond just skin deep. It's more than just look and feel. Design is look and feel, but it's also how it works, how the user interacts with it. And a thoughtful design is really important because it affects the credibility of your website. When people come to sites, and let's say that they come to a site and it looks like it was created 10 years ago, they think, oh, the information here might be dated as well. If it just doesn't look very professional overall, again, that can reflect on how people think about your information. So if your design doesn't look very professional, they might think that your data doesn't hold the same kind of rigor as well. So it's important to know that having a good design is important because it does affect people's opinions of what they're looking at. And it can impact the user experience as well. Sites that are frustrating to use, people don't return to. Or if they have to use, they use them kind of begrudgingly, that it's not a good experience. So design certainly affects that user experience as well. And if you're with an organization, or even if you're not, it affects kind of your brand, whether it's your personal brand or the brand of your organization. People, when you're producing things, if you've got a logo on it for, UMSI's, let's say, people are going to look at that and go, oh, okay, well, this is an UMSI's product, so, I expect a certain thing. Or if the quality is not good, it's going to reflect negatively, and they say, oh, well, this really doesn't look very good. These UMSIS folks might not know what they're doing. So it's important to realize that everything you put out there really does reflect on you, and you've got a large audience when it comes to the web, or a large potential audience. And again, as I said, it's more than just look and feel. Design is about how things work, how pleasing the experience is, etc. So let's talk about another element of a great website, and that is content. We have a saying in the web world that content is king. The idea there is that content is really kind of the most important thing about your website. It's why people come to your website in the first place. It's what gets them coming back. It is often how they found your website. So let's say that you've got a website with great content. They may have found you by going to a search engine and typing in something related to the content in your site. So content is very critical, and having, again, a good quality content, making sure that it's getting proofed and that people are looking at your content is critical as well. Make sure that it's audience focused and that you know your audience, again, very critical. So the importance of content, it is critical to a successful site. Technology is another aspect when it comes to thinking about what makes a great website. At the end of the day, technology should be kind of invisible to the user. Things should work, things should function, but the user shouldn't have to kind of think about the technology behind it. It's important that technology is something there to support what you're doing and not a limitation. If you find that the technology is limiting what you can do, you might be using the wrong technologies. So it should help you accomplish the things that you're trying to accomplish. It should follow standard conventions, but technology should not get in your way. And then, of course, user experience. User experience is critical. Can your users complete tasks? So early in the process, we came up with some tasks. We validated those through some user research, and we have these tasks that we expect people to be able to do. Can they complete them? That's something we can measure. We can measure that through additional user testing, actually testing your live website, and you can measure whether or not they can complete the task. We can also look at how long it takes them to complete the task. One of the things that you'll find is on the web that people have a very short attention span. If they're not able to accomplish what they're trying to quickly, they'll often leave. So having people at least know that they're on the right trail is really critical. Otherwise, you'll lose users. Another critical aspect to user experience is overall satisfaction. And again, that can be measured as well through surveys, through usability testing. We can find out, do people have a good experience using your web product? And that's important because ultimately, if they do, they're more likely to return, they're more likely to promote your site, and more likely to become regular users of your product. Another thing that's important in building a great site is a great user interface. And user interface goes hand in hand with design and usability. It's about keeping things simple. There's always a temptation to add more to web products, and oftentimes the simplest product that meets the need is the best product. You want to keep things consistent and use common user interface elements. You don't want your pages to look like a ransom note, and that happens sometimes. People get attracted to the technology and begin to use different things for the sake of using them. You want to be purposeful in your page layout. So again, thinking about those prototypes, thinking about your storyboards, how can those translate into kind of the web design and the page design. You want to strategically use color and texture. Sometimes color is used to convey meaning, but you've got to also keep in mind that there are users out there that are colorblind or may have other limitations, so you want to make sure that you do have affordances for those users as well. You also want to think about how you can use typography, not only to make your page look great, but also to show hierarchy and clarity of your message. Whether it's using proper headings and things like that, how you might pull a quote out and other things like that. And of course, make sure the website communicates status. So let's say that part of your site is pulling up a complex map, and the map takes a minute to load. If there's no indication there to the user it takes a minute to load, they may become impatient and leave. So it's important that the site is constantly kind of communicating status and what's happening. And thinking about defaults. If you have default settings, those are always important to think about in a user interface. So let's move on now and talk a little bit about some of the great data visualization tools available out there on the web. So there are a lot of different tools out there available to help you create kind of some of the products that you would use in your visualization. Maybe it's a chart or a graph or an infographic. And there's some really great tools out there, some of which are free, that you can use to help you create some of these things. I'm going to talk just about a few of them today, but be ready to explore other options as well. One of the first things I'm going to talk about is something called TABLEAU Public. TABLEAU Public is a platform that enables you to create kind of interactive charts and graphs and maps and dashboards and even applications based on your own data. So you can import your own data and very easily create these different types of visual elements. You can then publish these elements anywhere on the web. You can even kind of create a basic page through TABLEAU to make it easy to share. It's a very easy service to use, although I will say that the first time I used it took me a little bit of time to kind of understand the user interface. It is a free service, so that's great. And they do have paid services as well. What it enables you to do are do simple data visualization, charts and graphs and other things. And here's an example of a dynamic chart that I created. I took data from one of our blue crab indicators and just imported the Excel spreadsheet, pointed it at the columns and rows, and very quickly I had a graph that I was able to do some customization on. I kind of thickened the line and added some data points above it. This graph represents female spawning abundance of crabs versus year. And it took me a matter of minutes to create. And from that point, it took just a second to publish it to the web. So to actually publish it out there so I could share it with other folks. I could even take this chart and embed it in my own website, which is something that would be great for you guys to consider as well. So again, TABLEAU, powerful, simple with somewhat of a learning curve. I think that once you kind of understand some of the basics, you're able to do a lot of things fairly easily. And again, it's expandable, into kind of their enterprise products as well. Another one that I've used in the past is something called Infogram. And Infogram is another product that lets you create charts and infographics. You can easily publish them through the web. Again, you can import your own data. It's easy to use, and they have free and paid options. With Infogram, I was able to create this little blue crab data visualization in just a couple minutes. I put in a title, I grabbed a photo and a little bit of text and a graph, and that was a graph that I made by importing my own data and choosing some of the graphing options, and this probably took me less than 5 minutes to do. This can be published as its own web page. It can also be embedded inside of another web page as well. So you get the idea. It's something that enables you to make these kinds of things fairly quickly and easily. Here's another. I took that same data set, the female spawning crab abundance, and I chose another kind of option that they had in their charting. This one kind of shows kind of an area, and if you look year and then the abundance of blue crabs, so 2010, for instance, 246 million was the number, and that's represented by a rather large square. But if we look at some of the smaller squares, like 1999, 53 million, another visual way to kind of show your data. And again, this was something that took me probably 30 seconds beyond the other graph because I changed type and made a couple minor adjustments. So there are other tools out there as well, some of them more tailored towards people with web development experience. So with TABLEAU or Infogram, you need no web development background or experience, and you can create those charts and graphs. But there are some things that are really tailored towards web developers or web designers. CHART.JS is one of those. It requires you to know some HTML and CSS and JavaScript, but it is free. It's very powerful and simple. We used it recently for Chesapeake Progress to make our charts, our dynamic charts on that website. And here's an example, that same blue crab data, but this was done using that interface. And in this case, we were able to customize it to work with our content management system and get this really robust solution. But again, this is for people that have a bit more background in maybe web development or design, as it does require, coding. And there are other examples like this as well. But again, there are a lot of things out there to help you visualize your data within a web product. Many tools. If you want to do mapping, there's something called Leaflet. Of course, Google Maps is another option. Fusion Charts is something that we've used in the past for the Bay program. Seemingly unlimited number of charts and options that you have with something like that. And that one requires a little bit of development background, but a little less than some of the other options. D3.js is another one, much like Charts.js. Google has their own charting option as well, and there's many, many more tools out there to be used to help you visualize your data. So with those tools in mind, let's say now that you want to build your own website, and maybe you want to take something you created, an infogram or Tableau, and embed it in one of those websites. But where do you start if you want to create your own website? You've gone through, you've thought about your audience, you've thought about your business case, you've done a little bit of research, you've mocked up some ideas on paper, but now you're ready to actually build a site. Where do you go from here? Well, there's a lot of options. Of course, there's always the option to kind of, bake your own, so to speak, kind of from the ground up to make something, of your own. And that option in this case involves, custom HTML and CSS and JavaScript and all these other things. So if you know some HTML and CSS, this might be an option for you. But if you're not looking to become a web designer or developer, this might be a little more complicated. It is easy to create a simple site with HTML and CSS, but it is going to take you some time to really, really master it. I would say that getting started with HTML and CSS is fairly easy, but it does take time to master. So this is an option, and again, if you know HTML and CSS, that's a great option for you. But you will spend more time than some of the other options that we're going to discuss. I want to discuss some service-based options. So there are a number of services out there that are really designed to help you create a website, set up a domain, host your site, all in one kind of easy package. One of my favorites is a product called Squarespace. Squarespace is an inclusive package. You get a domain, you get hosting, everything is managed through Squarespace. You start off with this fantastic CMS and these beautiful templates, and you're able to kind of choose your look and feel from a number of different template designs. And they're great templates. They're responsive, which means that they work well across devices, whether you're on a mobile device like a phone or a tablet, they work well on those devices. So Squarespace gives you kind of the content management part and the basic templates that get you started. It's very robust and it's quite extensible as well. So even if you know nothing about designing websites, you'd be able to get started with Squarespace. However, if you're a designer or developer, you could even go into Squarespace and kind of customize things. It gives you a lot of options. It's a very stable, scalable platform, so there's a lot that that you can do with it. One of the things that they always advertise is that you can't really take down a Squarespace site. They've got a scalable hosting platform, so if your website happens to be listed on the New York Times one day, Squarespace is able to handle the traffic. A lot of other sites, you have a limit on the amount of bandwidth that you can get, and as a result, if something like that were to happen, your site would go down. Squarespace is fairly inexpensive at about $8 a month if you pay annually, and you can get started for free. And I would encourage you guys to play with some of these things. You can go sign up. You don't require a credit card, and you can set up your own site. And it'll take you a little bit of time to kind of get it initially, but very quickly you can get a professional-looking site up and running. Another option is WordPress.com. WordPress.com is a hosted platform for WordPress. Again, it's an inclusive package. It includes your domain and your hosting, but you can go and you can set up a website fairly easily and quickly. There are templates and many, many templates to choose from. If you don't find a template that you like, there's a wide market for people that sell templates as well, so you can find a template that kind of helps fit your needs. It's a hosted platform. They've got an easy-to-use content management system. It was really designed more as a blogging platform, but it's expanded to host business sites, nonprofit sites, really a lot of different types of websites. You can start off on WordPress.com for free if you want to get your own domain, and you're going to spend a little bit of money, about $8.25 a month, so it's not a lot of money. But again, it's a robust platform that lets you set up a site fairly easily. TUMBLR is another option. TUMBLR is free. It's kind of a micro-blogging platform. The one thing I'll say about it is it's really focused on blogging, and there are limitations on what you can do. It's really designed to be very, very simple to use. So you may find that it lacks some of the functionality that you would get in a WordPress or a Squarespace, or of course if you did your own. It wasn't really intended to be a full content management system. But again, it is a free option and something you could get started with a fair amount of ease. So those are some options, and of course there are many more out there. You can search for free web hosting or free websites. There's a lot of options in that vein. But, spending a little bit of money sometimes is better than free, because you'll get a more stable platform. If you want to learn more, of course, you can go to Google and look up some options. But there are some great learning resources out there as well. Lynda.com is one that I recommend if you want to learn more about building websites. Code School is another great one if you're interested in actually, hey, I'd like to learn HTML and CSS. Code School has some really fantastic tutorials. Of course, YouTube, if you can find some good resources, there's typically some great ones there as well. And a lot of good books out there in terms of web design and development. So there's always additional resources out there. So hopefully this has given you kind of an overview of some of the things that you can do out there in terms of creating a web product, that you can highlight your data visualization work. If you have any questions, you can contact me through the university. And here's my contact information. And I look forward to seeing you all for the lecture. Thank you.